The shadow in the mirror. The world is a dark and terrifying place, far more so than Hollywood movies ever portray. For years, I worked as a private investigator, witnessing all shades of human greed and madness. Yet, there is one case that still haunts my nightmares to this day, a case that proved to me how a face smiling at you in public can easily hide a cold-blooded, psychopathic monster underneath. To protect what remains of her life, I will call her Elena. I met Elena about 2 years ago. She was an ambitious, brilliant young woman working as a freelance graphic and software designer. Starting from scratch, she spent most of her time between a co-working space and an upscale cafe to finish her projects. It was there that a man named Victor entered her life. He was a regular, always dressed in the finest clothes, driving a luxury sports car, and showing a suspiciously deep interest in her software projects, using his charm and immense wealth to get close to her. The relationship eventually evolved into a friendship. When Elena faced a suffocating financial crisis that nearly destroyed her startup, Victor was the savior, ready to help. She reluctantly agreed to accept his financial investment, completely unaware that she had just signed away her freedom. The moment the money changed hands, the mask of kindness vanished. Victor turned into an obsessive, psychologically abusive tormentor. There were round-the-clock calls, threatening messages, and suffocating surveillance. It escalated to the point where he publicly punched someone she went on a date with, knocking him unconscious, and used his influence to escape any legal consequences. Elena lived a living nightmare for months, until something strange happened. Victor suddenly vanished without a trace. 2 full years passed. Elena's business flourished, and she moved into a brand new apartment in a modern residential complex to start a fresh chapter. She decided she wanted to return the investment money to Victor, hoping to rid herself of the guilt and any lingering tie to him. To her shock, the man had evaporated. His numbers were disconnected, his social media accounts were deleted, and even at the places he used to frequent, no one had heard of him for years. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed him whole. Until that dark night arrived. At midnight, a series of heavy, frantic knocks rattled her new apartment door. Peering through the peephole, she caught a glimpse of a tall figure wearing a hood. Her female intuition screamed a single name: Victor. He waited behind the door for 20 long minutes before vanishing into the darkness. Early the next morning, Elena was sitting in my office, recounting the story while trembling uncontrollably, begging me to find him and end this nightmare. I began my investigation, and what I discovered made the blood freeze in my veins. The man who paraded around pretending to be wealthy was nothing but a professional con artist. Victor wasn't even his real name. It belonged to a man who had died years ago, whose identity he had entirely stolen to go into hiding. And the worst part, the money he had invested with Elena wasn't his, it was stolen capital, swindled from other women in different cities using the exact same diabolical method to trap them in his web. One night, while monitoring the perimeter of Elena's building from my car, I saw the hooded figure approaching her door again at 2 a.m. I quickly got out of my car to apprehend him, but he spotted me and bolted with incredible speed into the dead of night. I shadowed him cautiously. Instead of fleeing outside the complex, I watched him enter an old residential building located directly opposite Elena's new apartment. I immediately called Elena and told her to vacate the apartment and head to a safe location. I then climbed the stairs of the opposite building, tracking the trail until I reached an apartment where a strange, foul odor was wafting from beneath the door. I slowly pushed the door open, and was instantly hit by a sickening stench and utter chaos. The place was filthy, littered with rotting food and empty liquor bottles. But what paralyzed me completely was standing right in the middle of the living room. Greater than there stood a clothing mannequin, dressed in the exact outfit Elena had worn during their very first meeting at the cafe years ago. Next to the mannequin was a professional telescope, aligned with terrifying precision toward Elena's bedroom window across the way. Greater than. I turned my eyes to the walls and was struck by a profound sense of shock. The walls were completely covered with a timeline and sequential photographs tracking Elena's every daily movement. Victor hadn't been missing for the past 2 years. He had been living right in front of her, sipping his coffee while watching the most intimate details of her life, her silence, and her sleep every single night. I called the police immediately. A tactical unit stormed the place just as Victor had slipped back into the apartment. He was clutching the mannequin, whispering to it in a terrifying murmur. He completely broke down, hysterically trying to attack the officers, but he was successfully restrained and arrested. It was later determined that he had suffered a total mental and psychological collapse, and he was committed to a maximum security psychiatric facility, deemed unfit to stand trial. We breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the case was finally closed. But I was wrong. A few months after the incident, on a bleak, overcast morning, Elena opened her new mailbox to find a mysterious envelope. Inside, there was no written note, nor any name. There was only a single lock of blonde hair, perfectly matching the hair of the mannequin found in Victor's twisted apartment. To this day, Elena lives in perpetual terror. Did Victor escape the asylum? Or was there another accomplice watching her alongside him all those years, unseen by anyone? The year 2021 was no ordinary year. It was a transitional period heavy with cautious silence and remote work as the world gradually recovered from the pandemic. In February of that year, I accepted a job offer that forced me to relocate to a remote coastal city, entirely shrouded in thick fog and mystery. My mission was quiet and precise: to archive and digitize legacy digital records for an ancient pharmaceutical company and environmental research institute. Due to the nature of my work and my reserved personality, I spent hours sifting through old documents and photographs. This sharpened my attention to detail and allowed me, as Tina, to notice what others might easily overlook, especially since I had a deep passion for nature photography and documentation. My absolute isolation in this foggy city drove me to seek a window of human connection. I used a local app dedicated to cultural exchange and shared hobbies, hoping to build casual friendships that might ease the heavy burden of loneliness. Among those I connected with was a man named Cyril. I met him for the first time at a small art gallery. He was an enigmatic man, suspiciously interested in antiquities and history, carrying a strange aura that made you feel he knew far more about you than he should, as if reading an open book. Despite the allure of his mystery, an internal alarm urged me to stay away. I gradually pulled back, and our communication dwindled until it faded completely. After Cyril, I dedicated my time to my work and myself, until I met Adrian at a cafe overlooking the coastal boardwalk. Adrian was a sound engineer and musician, possessing a calm, analytical personality and a great capacity to listen. A wonderful chemistry quickly sparked between us, marking the beginning of a true friendship and a genuine sharing of mutual interests. However, the peace did not last long. I began to notice a black SUV with tinted windows lingering outside my house every single night. Suddenly, it escalated into blatant stalking. One day, while I was in an old bookstore looking for reference materials, a suffocating feeling of being watched took hold of me. When I stepped out onto the foggy coastal boardwalk, I glanced toward the pier. Standing there from afar was a tall man in a dark coat, his hair slicked back, wearing sunglasses despite the heavy fog, holding an audio recording device pointed directly and clearly at me. Terrified, I hurried to my coffee date with Adrian at the coastal cafe, but my pale, panicked face betrayed me. With his analytical nature and my abrupt behavior, Adrian immediately noticed something was wrong. When I glanced around, I saw the exact same man in the coat sitting at a side table near the door, pretending to fiddle with his phone while watching us. Wanting to shield Adrian from this strange chaos, I made an excuse about an urgent work matter and left in a hurry, taking random, winding routes to lose the black SUV that trailed me in my rearview mirror before finally returning home. That night, while speaking to Adrian over the phone to explain my strange behavior, I looked out the window. To my utter shock, I saw the black SUV parked outside my house once again. I panicked, and Adrian convinced me to call the police immediately. When the patrol car arrived, I watched the scene unfold from my living room window. The tall man stepped out of his vehicle and spoke to the officers with immense calm and confidence, offering no defense or anger, before pulling something from his coat pocket to show the officer. When the police officer knocked on my door, he brought no comfort, only deepening the terror of the mystery. The officer told me coldly, "The man outside is a licensed private investigator hired by the security department of the institution you work for." He showed us his security badge, and this is an issue of corporate security, not personal stalking. I was stunned and terrified. What did the company want from me? What could I have possibly done when I barely knew anyone here? It was a blatant violation of my privacy. Weeks passed, heavily charged with anxiety. The car vanished, but the sensation of being watched remained like a weight on my chest. Over the weekend, Adrian suggested we visit an abandoned lighthouse on the outskirts of the coastal city, so he could capture some recordings of the crashing ocean waves and I could take nature photographs to hopefully regain my composure. Yet, despite the stillness, Adrian kept looking back, as if there was movement among the surrounding trees. We arrived at the lighthouse, and just as we were about to begin, Cyril suddenly appeared from inside the structure, completely cornering us. His gaze was not that of an obsessed lover talking about betrayal. It was the cold, sharp gaze of an investor or a hunter who had finally found his prey. He yelled at me in a piercing, freezing tone, "Where is the digital flash drive, Tina?" I recoiled in horror, desperately denying any knowledge of it, but he advanced toward me in a rage, snarling, "I created a fake profile on that app solely to get to you. The secret files and documents you mistakenly transferred along with the company archives are worth millions, and you aren't leaving this place without them." He lunged at me with force, attempting to rip my bag away, and I began to scream. Adrian didn't hesitate for a second. Drawing upon his steady composure and using the heavy audio equipment he was carrying to defend me, he delivered a powerful blow to Cyril, knocking him to the floor and pinning him in place. At that exact moment, the police stormed the lighthouse alongside the private investigator himself. It turned out that the corporate investigator had been monitoring the entire situation from afar through binoculars to ensure I didn't leak the data, and he intervened just in time with the police to arrest Cyril on charges of industrial espionage and attempted robbery by force. The investigator assured the police of my complete innocence, confirming that Cyril was the real danger who had been tracking me to obtain the hidden files within the archive. The nightmare was over. I packed my bags, left that foggy city, and resigned from my job immediately to move on with my life. I thought I had escaped. But a week after settling into my new city, I was putting on my old coat, and as I fumbled through its pockets, the blood froze in my veins. Tucked away in the corner of an inner pocket, I found a microscopic, highly sophisticated tracking device, a device that was still blinking with faint, rhythmic red pulses. To this day, I do not know if Cyril placed it there before the attack at the lighthouse, or if the corporate private investigator never truly stopped watching me, leaving me in a perpetual state of suspense and mystery. Trapped in the shadows. One of my many fatal flaws is that I am easily influenced by peer pressure, making me someone who is easily manipulated and persuaded into doing almost anything. As a teenager, this dependency constantly led me to disasters. For instance, I was expelled from my first high school because I tried to steal the principal's car just because my friends dared me to, purely to prove a fake sense of bravado. Unfortunately, this weakness didn't disappear as I grew up. It followed me like my shadow into adulthood, pushing me this time into a terrifying abyss that almost cost me my life. A few years ago, I was consumed by a terrible feeling and a dark paranoia that my fiancée, Lena, was cheating on me. Instead of acting maturely and confronting her, I committed my usual sin. I confided in a few friends. Instead of advising me to be rational, they injected toxic thoughts into my mind, saying that as long as I felt this way, there had to be some truth to it. The idea nested in my brain. I lost the ability to sleep or eat, and my life turned into a living hell. It was then that one of them made a suggestion that changed everything: hire a private investigator to track her without her knowing. The suggestion seemed insane to me, and I had no idea how these things actually worked. But under the influence of panic, I did what no one should ever do. I didn't look on conventional websites. Instead, curiosity and ignorance led me to an encrypted site on the dark web through a secret, illegal chat application dedicated to unauthorized services. There, I got in touch with a man named Adam. We agreed to meet to exchange initial data. Adam chose an odd location, an isolated, semi-abandoned cafe on the outskirts of the city. When I arrived, I felt overwhelmed by shame and suspicion. I looked around until a tall, overweight man in shabby sportswear gestured to me. He looked nothing like the detectives in movies. He was accompanied by a girl named Mia, who was dressed even less professionally than he was. Adam noticed my nervousness and immediately reassured me in a low voice, telling me not to worry about Mia because she was his partner. He justified their appearance by explaining that the nature of their work required them to avoid formal wear so they could blend into crowds. I bought his excuse, viewing it as professional cleverness at the time. We sat in a dark corner, and Adam began questioning me. His questions weren't ordinary. They started taking a strange, deeply personal, and intimate turn. He asked for minute details about my childhood, the name of my first pet, the city where I first met my fiancée, my account handles, and my old work addresses. Those questions weren't for the purpose of an investigation, as I later realized, but rather a systematic social engineering operation to gather secret answers and passwords for my bank accounts and email. At the end of the session, Adam demanded a large sum of money as a down payment, stipulating that it had to be entirely in cash to keep it off official records. I handed over the money hesitantly and left, with a deep sense of suspicion gnawing at my chest. A whole week of absolute silence passed. Adam vanished and stopped replying to messages, until I became certain I had been scammed. Then, one night, precisely at 1:16 a.m., my phone vibrated with an encrypted message from him. He claimed he had to change his phone for security reasons, that he had shocking, game-changing information about Lena, and that it couldn't wait. We had to meet immediately. I looked at Lena, who was fast asleep next to me. She had spent the entire day at home with me, which made his words make no sense. I urged him to meet in the morning, but his reply was decisive: morning would be far too late. He told me to bring the remaining balance and come to the address he sent immediately. Because the nature of my job required me to be ready for emergency calls at night, slipping out at this hour was easy, even though my mind was completely paralyzed from thinking logically. I drove for 10 minutes under the weight of an indescribable panic until I reached the destination, a massive commercial complex and office towers, completely locked and dark. The place was desolate and spine-chilling. I received a message from him saying that the gate to the underground parking lot was open, instructing me to drive inside. I drove my car downward, descending gradually. On the first level, it was pitch black with absolutely no movement. On the second level, the lighting became dim, flickering irregularly, and I noticed my phone network signal dropping significantly. When I went down to the third level, the deepest underground, the air became thin, and my reception and internet were on the verge of disappearing completely. I stopped the car. The exact moment the very last signal bar vanished from my phone screen, the device vibrated with a final message that took my breath away. Greater than, I see you now. Drive your car toward the dark corner behind the last concrete pillar. Greater than. At that precise moment, alarm bells violently rang in my head. An instinctual terror told me that this was not a professional meeting, but an isolated trap cut off from the world deep underground, where no one would hear my screams and a disconnected phone couldn't save me. Without thinking, I threw the gear into reverse and slammed my foot on the gas pedal with all my might. The car shot backward at a ferocious speed, tires screeching through the corridors of the dark garage. I sped up the ramps like a madman until I broke out onto the public street, and I didn't breathe a sigh of relief until I saw the normal city lights. The next day, I tried opening the encrypted app to message them, only to find that the account and the listing had been completely deleted, as if they had never existed. Panic attacks consumed me for months. Adam knew so much about me. Crushed by a psychological breakdown, I confessed everything to my fiancée, Lena. She cried and was deeply hurt by my doubt, but she embraced me, understood my struggle, and together we decided to inform the police and move to a completely new residence to regain our sense of security. The security report brought a shock that changed my outlook on life forever. The police investigation revealed that Adam and Mia were not detectives at all. They were members of an organized dark web ring specializing in robbery and kidnapping. Their plan was to lure desperate victims to isolated locations like underground parking lots, hold them at gunpoint, and seize their phones and financial accounts to drain all their savings and wealth before permanently getting rid of them. A whole year has passed since that breathtaking moment. Lena and I moved into our new home, got married, and I finally began to feel at peace, believing the nightmare was over. Until last night, as I sat sipping my coffee, my phone screen lit up with an urgent security notification from my bank. It indicated a nearly successful breach of my bank account, after someone entered the exact correct answer to my supplementary security question. It was the deeply intimate, highly private question I had confided to Adam during our very first meeting in that abandoned cafe. The blood froze in my veins as I stared at the screen. In that chilling moment of profound shock, I realized the truth. The gang had never let go. They were merely waiting in the shadows, biding their time for the perfect moment to come after me again.